It's July 2019, and the biggest news out of WNBA All-Star Weekend is that the greatest women's basketball player of all time is furious. Diana Taurasi has given a ruthless interview to ESPN. She's sick of being underpaid. It's just shocking to me, as we have the NBA as the best model ever, she says of her and her colleagues' pitifully low salaries. But the WNBA always finds a way to mess it up. I just don't get it. I'm so disillusioned with it all. That season, Taurasi will make $117,500, which is great if you're a writer working for a sports blog. But that is pocket change compared to the salaries that professional male athletes make. NBA players were making more in the late 60s. Taurasi is in her 16th season in the league at this point. She's won 3 championships and made all WNBA 10 times. And in 2017, she broke the WNBA's all-time scoring record. And yet here she is, making entry-level money. And you know what she says in the interview? We come back every single summer because we love the game. It's pathetic. It's hard to believe that was the state of affairs only 6 years ago. Everything feels different now. Here in 2025, women's sports are undeniably having a moment.
For the first time in a long time, female athletes are getting the recognition they deserve.
Interest in women's sports has never been higher than it's been this past week during the NCAA Women's Basketball Tournament, which ends today.
There's never been a year like it in women's sports.
TV ratings for both the WNBA and the NWSL are way up year over year. The Sports Bra, a women's sports bar in Portland, has been so successful they're opening up locations in 4 U.S. cities. In 2024, more people watched the women's gymnastics finale at the Paris Olympics than the NBA Finals or the NFL Draft. But the players' salaries haven't kept pace with their popularity. And as nice as it is that more people are watching, you can't exactly eat ratings. Caitlin Clark is one of the most famous players in the WNBA, and she'll make less than 1/14 of what the lowest paid NBA player will make this year. Part because the WNBA has something called a salary cap. It's a mechanism negotiated by the league and the players' union that caps how much money teams can spend on players. The WNBA would argue that the pitifully low salary cap is for the players' own good, as it allows the league to grow sustainably. But a certain pervasive sort of cheating scandal gives the game away. In the past few seasons, a bunch of team owners have managed to compensate their players beyond what's allowed under the salary cap. They got caught and then didn't really try to hide it. In an industry known for paying abysmally low salaries, why did team owners suddenly start fighting to pay their team more? And why did they do it under the table? Welcome back to Only If You Get Caught, a show about breaking the rules. I'm Patrick Redford. And this week we have a story about a very simple form of cheating, undertaken for extremely interesting reasons. It's a story about the fight to narrow the gender pay gap, one that could take a very happy turn very soon. It's a story about how management has cheated labor so thoroughly that now they're forced to turn on their last remaining opponents, each other.
Hey, are you ready to do cheat sheet?
I'm so ready.
Okay, as a reminder, you have 1 minute to tell me who cheated, who was cheated, what rule is broken, who is the arbiter, and what are the stakes. Are you ready?
I'm very ready.
3, 2, 1, go.
Okay. Who cheated? Theoretically, the owners of 2 of the most successful WNBA teams, the Aces and the Liberty, who are owned by Mark Davis and Joe and Clara Tsai, respectively. Basically, what happened is they had like bought into the WNBA and had won titles, and they were like, "This is great. We like winning." And it's actually very easy because all the other like clown owners in the league are just like sort of owning these teams for like weird, silly reasons. And so like it's actually like not that hard to like go out and pay a bunch of players a lot of money and like win championships. And so each of the 2 teams essentially paid their players more than they were like allowed to do. And the very like existence of a mechanism that caps how much players can make is like a really key, interesting part of this story. And that's the rule that was broken. The arbiter is the WNBA, like the league itself, who has responded to their players getting paid like living wages basically for the first time. They responded to that by like threatening the hell out of these teams and like conducting investigations and threatening all these like crazy fines, basically because the players making more money, or at least being like compensated for their labor in a more open market style, like not artificially depressed sort of salary cap system, means that like other owners will have to compete with each other and actually try to win. So really it's like the players getting paid under the table and the owners having to cheat to like pay them basically shows just how underpaid all these women are. That was like 30 seconds, right? We went so fast.
So I've got 1 minute and 36 seconds.
Okay. Yeah, a multiple of 30 seconds almost.
Yeah, it's close.
If you've heard of a WNBA team, it's probably the New York Liberty. They won a title in 2024. Celebrities sit courtside every night, and they have the most beloved mascot in sports, Ellie the Elephant.
I don't think any mascot has risen to such superstardom and popularity.
Previous owner James Dolan had all but left the franchise to rot. Then, in 2019, Clara Wu Tsai and her husband Joe bought the team, moved Liberty games to Brooklyn, and started trying to win as quickly as possible. And they made a bunch of big moves as soon as they took over. Their first big move was to trade Tina Charles, a former league MVP, for 3 first-round picks. Their second big move was to select Sabrina Ionescu with the top pick in the 2020 draft. And their third was to pay for planes? Specifically, they paid for Liberty players to fly to away games on charter flights throughout the second half of the 2021 season.
For most of the league's existence, WNBA players have flown commercial airlines to road games.
This is my colleague at Defector, Maitreyi Anantharaman, who covers the WNBA.
That is pretty unusual for major pro sports now. If you are an NBA player, you are flying in a private plane. So it was a hassle often. There were delays that affected when they arrived in a city and how much time they had to practice. Planes are uncomfortable for very tall people, and basketball players tend to be very tall people. And so I think it was actually just uncomfortable, and there were also some downstream like health issues with that.
Wow, that's great, right? Like the players get to enjoy themselves. Surely the league was happy with this. No.
And so when the WNBA finds out that the Liberty are doing this, I think the real ire comes from a lot of other owners who are upset. So it was believed that if one owner or a couple owners were chartering planes and others would not, it would create this huge competitive advantage for the owners who were chartering planes in free agency when they were trying to recruit players. And so the solution was just that no one could charter planes. And so the reporting goes that a lot of different punishments up and down the board were considered. Folding the franchise was one. A huge fine ended up being the result. I think for Joe Tsai, who has lots of money, it was probably the best $500,000 he ever spent because he got lots of great press for it. And it's really just a drop in the bucket for him.
The Liberty's owners even offered to fully fund charter flights for all the league's 12 teams for 3 years. But the other owners still said no. So why would the other owners view the Tsai's charter plan as an existential threat? Because, in their words, once players got used to being treated like professionals, quote, there'd be no going back. In other words, it would threaten the system of exploitation that the WNBA was built on. The Tsais represented a new class of WNBA owner, owners who actually wanted to win. That should be the bare minimum for sports ownership. Yet, some of the league's other owners treated ownership like an act of charity, while others used their franchises as a place to park losses from elsewhere in their corporate empires. The charter flight issue? is a perfect symbol of that anti-competitivity. Las Vegas Aces owner Mark Davis is a lot like Clara Wu Tsai.
Mark Davis said in a statement today, quote, "I am excited to announce that I have entered into an agreement to purchase the Las Vegas franchise in the WNBA from MGM Resorts International."
He moved the Raiders from Oakland to Vegas in 2020, months before he bought the Aces. Like the Tsais, he immediately poured money into his team. Davis dropped $40 million on a new practice facility, which was the first time a WNBA team had one all to themselves.
Mark Davis obviously had this reputation from being an NFL owner, and it wasn't a great reputation, honestly. It was that he was sort of meddlesome. It was that he actually was one of those more cash poor owners whose primary source of income was the team and did not have some other side billion-dollar business with which to spend money and build new facilities. But he, I think, very quickly proved to be this very engaged owner. He was actually going to the games and being photographed at the games, which was kind of a rare thing for a WNBA owner to do.
He took pride in the team and cared about it, basically.
He cared about it. He was palling it up with all the players courtside. He was bringing big guests to sit with him. Tom Brady, the governor of Nevada, all kinds of VIP guests. And it was this sort of scene that you see at a lot of NBA games where the owner will have some fancy guest courtside, but that was just not a common sight in the WNBA.
And there's a point sort of worth hammering home there. I guess, what does it say about the state of labor dynamics? And this is a very leading question. Labor dynamics and wage exploitation. If a cash poor owner, not someone who has $11 billion like the Tsais, can come in and make such a splash.
Yeah, that was the big story to me. I remember people at the time saying oh, these new rich owners are changing everything. But I didn't know exactly the state of his bank account or anything, but I didn't actually think he was the richest owner. I thought he was probably somewhere in the middle of the pack. There are lots of other billionaire sports owners. And so it was really just the fact that he showed up and cared that made him seem like he was some hotshot, super lavish guy. But really it was just this bare minimum because the bar was so low.
The amount he paid for the practice facility is more than the franchise has ever paid every person who has ever played for them combined. He poached Becky Hammon from the San Antonio Spurs and made her the first $1 million coach in league history. Within a year, the Aces won their first title before repeating in 2023 and winning again in 2025. The best player on the Aces is A'ja Wilson, a genius in the mid-range who made $200,000 last season. That is twice what she was paid by the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority to promote the city's healthy tourism industry in the spring of 2024. In fact, each Aces player earned $100,000 to take part in the campaign, which had them appear in ads and attend events.
The dollar amounts in women's basketball is why you can do this. Technically, an NBA team could end up with some deal with, a local restaurant chain where they all decide to pay them twice their salary in endorsement deals or whatever, and bogus endorsement deals, but no small business has that kind of cash to make it worth it for an NBA player. It can happen in any sport, but it's something that can actually happen pretty easily in women's basketball because $100,000 times 10 or 11 is not a lot of money.
For half the team, that's more than they made all season on their WNBA contracts. And taken together, the $1.2 million is 80% of the salary cap. Naturally, the WNBA launched a big investigation. So far, they have yet to turn anything up. But I think you'd have to be pretty naive not to see the payments for what they are. A way for the people who benefit from the Aces' labor to compensate them for that labor. Even if the Aces themselves are not actively coordinating with the tourism people, the payments are only noteworthy because they highlight how underpaid the players are. Also, the Aces have been caught trying something like this before. a different investigation uncovered that Ace's ownership had promised a player they would pay for her daughter's private school tuition under the table. When that came out, the team had to forfeit their first-round draft pick. Clearly, no one is too scared of the WNBA because before this most recent season, the Las Vegas tourism people announced they would bring the payments back. The nature of the league's complaint, in both cases, is that the Aces and the Liberty circumvented the salary cap. Why is that so important? Most major American sports have one. It's a collectively bargained maximum amount that teams are allowed to spend on players' salaries. If owners could spend as much as they wanted on players, then one or two teams would probably win everything, leaving the other owners to fight for scraps. You can see what it looks like in a league that doesn't have salary caps. In European soccer leagues, the biggest teams spend orders of magnitude more money than their downtrodden peers. And you can see that disparity reflected in who wins all the titles. The theory of salary caps is that they enforce competitive balance, ensuring that every team has a chance. This matters way more in an American-style franchise system. If a league is trying to expand into smaller markets, they need those new teams to have a chance of actually winning. Leagues want healthy competition between teams, though only to a certain degree. Then why does a league like the NBA even need 30 teams? What is the point of being a fan of a bad team in a small market, like, say, Sacramento, if you know your team can never win? Why would you part with your hard-earned cash to support a sinking ship? The argument the league would make is that a salary cap increases wages because it ensures that more players get paid. It's an argument for stability. The purpose of a salary cap is ultimately to grow the league. There are some issues with those arguments that we'll get into, but the next important thing to know is that the size of a salary cap is negotiated. It's not imposed top-down on the players. A union and a league have to agree on it. In the case of the NBA and the NFL, the two parties agree to split a certain percentage of revenues. That is, all the money that comes in through TV rights, ticket sales, and merchandise. NBA players negotiated 51% of revenue, while NFL players get 48%. This is sort of a tangent, but that 3% difference is actually pretty interesting. It highlights how much more powerful a union is in basketball than football. There are fewer NBA players, and individual stars are more valuable, which gives them more leverage. Cap circumvention in the NBA briefly became the biggest story in sports this fall when news broke that Clippers star Kawhi Leonard was probably being paid under the table by his team.
And explosive allegations out of the NBA today involving the Clippers alleging that they paid Kawhi Leonard $28 million outside of the league's salary cap. Podcaster Pablo Torre broke the allegations, reporting today that
in the WNBA, the players get 9%. 9%. Of all the jarring disparities in this story, I think that number shocked me the most. But maybe it shouldn't have. WNBA players have been underpaid since the league started 28 years ago. For so long, the league argued against paying players a living wage on the logic that the existence of the league itself was something like a charity. And the WNBA has lost money almost every year. Part of that is the weird ownership structure of the league. The NBA owns 42%. And they seem to regard their own investment as somewhat embarrassing for a long time. The NBA sold broadcast rights in an 11-year, $76 billion deal last year. Of that $76 billion, the NBA earmarked $2.2 billion to go to the WNBA. That number represents a 500% increase, yet it is still probably well below market value. It means that the WNBA, somehow, could be thought of as subsidizing the NBA, not the other way around. But that doesn't jibe with how women's basketball is talked about.
So the opaque ownership structure, I think, absolutely affects the public narrative around the WNBA. It's common to say WNBA teams don't make a profit or the league loses X amount of money, but it's hard to know exactly what that means or what is being measured there when, if it's just part of your regular NBA business, like, what accounting are you doing, right? And so a quote from, I think, Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, about how much the WNBA loses every year or how unprofitable it's been, ends up being this sort of recurring trope or, message that is put out there a lot. And so it's hard to know exactly what the value of the WNBA is. Another thing that's tricky about its ownership structure is its media deals are bundled with the NBA's. And so the valuation of the new WNBA media deal is just kind of this made up number based on what the NBA got. They haven't actually gone and sold the rights separately and to see how much it's worth. And so there's just some fuzzy math where you're not exactly sure what numbers people are coming up with, where they're getting them, what the agenda behind using them is.
If you're enjoying this episode of Only If You Get Caught and you're wondering how you can support us, the best way to help the show is a 5-star rating and review wherever you're listening right now. For a long time, mainstream sports culture treated the WNBA like a punchline if they talked about it at all. The joke was that nobody cared about the WNBA, that the games were boring because nobody could dunk, that any random man on the street could walk onto a WNBA roster and dominate. Rather than combat the misogyny and racism that defined mainstream WNBA coverage and actually try to make money on their investment, the powers that be used it as cover to keep from having to pay anyone. The idea that nobody watches the WNBA became a self-fulfilling prophecy.
A good state championship caliber high school boys team would smoke the best team in the WNBA.
I see it from both sides. I know these females want to get paid more, and they're very talented. Like the best ping pong player is just as talented as the best basketball player. That doesn't mean they're going to get paid the same because
they play ping pong. Why can't we lower the goal to at least 9.5 feet? Because I think for somebody that don't watch WNBA basketball, to have women dunking on other women would definitely bring more excitement to that game.
There is one very obvious flaw in the NBA's argument. People were paying these women to play basketball, just not anyone involved in the WNBA. Most players used to play in Europe all winter, where they made a lot more money. Remember Diana Taurasi, who gave that scathing interview in 2019? She skipped the entire 2015 season because her Russian team paid her more than 10 times what her WNBA team could. Brittany Griner was wrongfully detained in a Russian prison for nearly a year, but she was only in Russia in the first place because that's where she could get a fair paycheck. And former MVP Jonquel Jones had to leave her WNBA team for a few weeks in 2021 to go play for the Bosnian national team. Imagine what it must have felt like to be a WNBA star around this time. Half of your teammates from last season simply stayed put in Turkey or Russia because they'd rather make $500,000 than $50,000. Your league has just paid a consulting firm to roll out a flashy new slogan boasting of its feminist bona fides. Your owner does the same, though he doesn't know the names of anyone on his team. Your peers in the NBA are publicly asking you to say thank you for propping you up.
If you're an NBA player, you can complain about an NBA policy without feeling like it will seriously harm the reputation of the NBA.
If you ask for more money, you were told that could lead to the demise of professional women's basketball in North America.
It's certainly this weird position that women in many sports, I don't think basketball is alone in that. I think soccer, you see very much the same dynamic where players are afraid to speak out about actual abusive coaches or unsafe situations because they are worried for the future of the league. And so I think in 2018, 2019, they feel like, okay, now this feels like we're at a point in the league where I can say what I want to say and where I can't just keep playing along or trying to be a nice person anymore.
You would have to love basketball more than anything to put up with these indignities. At some point, it seems like it actually takes more energy and effort not to pay women to play basketball than it would to have a normal, functional WNBA. And it's remarkable how little it took to get the WNBA onto the right track. Former Deloitte CEO and college hooper Kathy Engelbert became the first commissioner of the league in May 2019. She took over at a somewhat dire time for women's sports, as the Canadian Women's Hockey League had suddenly folded the previous month. Engelbert would have to get the league in growth mode and do it quickly. The Players' Union expressed their optimism in the hire, and a few months later, the WNBA and the players announced a new CBA. The salary cap would go up, and the players would get some much-needed quality of life improvements.
So the 2020 CBA was a big step forward in a couple ways. The lead up to it was that the players had opted out of the previous collective bargaining agreement and decided to renegotiate a new one. That's what's happening right now as well. The players have decided that they're opting out of the 2020 CBA and are going to renegotiate a new one. And so the 2020 CBA gives these players a bunch of benefits, ones that I think kind of finally account for the different complications in a woman athlete's life specifically. So there is finally fully paid maternity leave. There are more allowances for childcare. There is like a stipend for egg freezing, things like that. And so the actual benefits themselves are big. The salaries do go up as well. They don't go up a ton, but now they're in the $250,000 range for a top end player. The other concession, I guess, or the big concession in this deal is that the players who in previous years had felt like, okay, I'm just going to come and go between my overseas team and my WNBA team because my WNBA team is not paying me as much. There are now rules in place that say you have to be at WNBA training camp on time or else you can't play this season. And so that is the owners saying you need to be WNBA players. You need to prioritize. It's the prioritization clause. You need to prioritize the WNBA. I would not be surprised if that is taken even further in the future. I don't know about this CBA, but I think at a certain point, some owner will say, I don't want you playing overseas at all. And so we might see kind of the reverse of the Diana Taurasi situation where a WNBA owner is paying extra to keep players at home or is saying you can't play overseas anymore.
The new CBA helped, but it clearly wasn't enough. It may have made sense in an era with absentee owners who didn't really care, but not when the league was growing and when Clara Wusai and Mark Davis were trying to win championships. The most obvious tell that the players were still underpaid was how easy it was for owners to cheat. Chartering a couple dozen flights is nothing for the owner of Alibaba, and finding the Tsai family $500,000 mostly serves to highlight the fact that they're worth more than $11 billion. If you're a free agent, seeing that an owner is willing to pay the largest fine in league history is probably super attractive. And in Vegas's case, the amount that the LVCVA paid to Aces players is less than 1% of their annual advertising budget. Did the Aces have anything to do with facilitating those payments? It doesn't really matter. The fact that a third party could come in and just double so many players' salaries so easily just shows how underpaid everyone was. I would also argue that Davis and Tsai cheating was critical in helping the league grow. The Aces and Liberty have a tremendous on-court rivalry, and their two huge fan bases push big TV ratings. And those ratings generated conversation and brought in millions of new fans. I know because I'm one of them. I was on a trip to Vegas in 2022 when I stopped in to watch the Aces play the Connecticut Sun, and I was instantly hooked. I'd watched the league casually for a few years, but it wasn't until I became an Aces fan that I really got into it. If you're lucky enough to watch A'ja Wilson protect the paint and Chelsea Gray toss cool dimes up close, all the arguments about the game not being as good will feel really stupid. The basketball they play is incredible. As the game was getting more popular in the Engelbert era, the players were starting to realize their own power. They began to flex their collective muscles, most notably when they basically got an owner removed from the league. Former U.S. Senator Kelly Loeffler owned the Atlanta Dream for a decade, and she was thought of as one of the league's least bad owners. She knew ball, and she took an active interest in running a good organization, which was more than most of her cohort could say. "I thought the Dream was so cool," former Dream player Laisha Clarendon said. "That's the first team I played for that was liberal." But after the WNBA announced it would be dedicating the 2020 season to Breonna Taylor and other black women killed by police, Loeffler came out hard against the Black Lives Matter movement, and her players revolted. They wore shirts endorsing her opponent, Raphael Warnock, as did players across the league. They publicly called for Loeffler to be forced to sell her stake in the team. Engelbert didn't cave, and yet the pressure campaign worked. Loeffler sold the team shortly after losing to Warnock. Helping take down a U.S. senator and get a racist lady booted from the league is so impressive. It galvanized the players' union right as the league started growing. By the time Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese were drafted in 2024, they joined a player base that was aware of its own power, increasingly famous, and still just as underpaid as ever. Speaking of that 2024 season, after slow, steady growth, the 2024 season was an explosion. Players had been asking for expansion for years, and the WNBA announced in late 2023 that the Bay Area would be getting the league's 13th franchise. Days before the 24 season began, Toronto also got an expansion slot, with Portland and Cleveland following slightly behind. Clark signed a $28 million Nike deal before she even stepped foot on the court. And when she did, she was an instant sensation, packing out the biggest arenas in the country. TV ratings went crazy. The WNBA Finals was one of the best basketball series I've ever seen, a thriller that the Liberty won in overtime of a winner-take-all Game 5. The basketball probably would have been worse had the players not flown between New York and Minnesota on charter flights. The league rolled out charter flights ahead of the 2024 season, and though the rollout was uneven, the players were thrilled. Not only because they could finally stretch their legs out, but because what was deemed cheating only years earlier was now official league policy. That shows why Davis and Tsai were smart to cheat. They were not undermining the WNBA so much as betting on its future. They were quickly proven right. Remember the Aces' famous $40 million practice facility? 3 teams have already beaten that number, the latest being the Sparks, who announced they were spending $150 million. And like the flights, these are not expenditures, but investments. With everyone fresh, the 2024 WNBA Finals smashed viewership records. The day after the series ended, the Players Union told the league they were opting out of the CBA. The two sides initially negotiated a 7-year deal in 2020, but the players had the right to opt out after 5. And given how underpaid they were and how popular the game was, it made strategic sense to negotiate while they had a good hand. What is the counterargument? Basically, don't mess this up by asking for too much. The W is in growth mode. Engelbert sold 16% of the league in 2022 to raise $75 million, and that's certainly helped the WNBA move as fast as they have to capitalize on all the growth in women's sports. With expansion, the league will say they've already given the players a lot by adding so many new roster spots. The WNBA's strongest leverage in negotiations is their own successful wage suppression. Most players are not rich enough to pitch a long strike without feeling some financial sting. And that's especially true since the once lucrative overseas opportunities in Russia and Israel have dried up as both of those countries are engaged in brutal wars of aggression, to put it mildly. But the players are ready. The pair of cheating scandals we talked about in this episode show that players are so underpaid that even team owners are breaking ranks to pay them. Players wore shirts bearing the slogan, "Pay us what you owe us" to All-Star Weekend this year. As negotiations were starting during the finals, Union President Nafisa Collier went in on Engelbert.
We have the best players in the world. We have the best fans in the world. But right now, we have the worst leadership in the world.
I know Diana Taurasi was proud. Last year, Collier and Brianna Stewart collaborated to launch Unrivaled, which is a 3-on-3 basketball league that takes place during the WNBA offseason. Unrivaled secured broadcast deals and sponsorship rights to give players an average salary higher than the WNBA's maximum salary. Talk about an existential threat. In a union negotiation, management's biggest threat to workers is unemployment. But if you are no longer the only game in town, that doesn't really work. The players have everything, including public goodwill, on their side, and they understand the stakes. Whether the players end up having to strike or not, they're certainly going to narrow the gender wage gap in sports, and by a significant margin, with this negotiation. The disparity between how much WNBA players are paid and how many people watch them play is significant, but that tension has to be expressed, and this is how it happens. That's actually why I'm so optimistic about the future here. The sports media landscape has changed in some radical ways in the last 5 years, but the biggest story is the rise of women's sports. That won't be the case forever, but the growth is real. And there's no reason to think it will be reversed. The money pouring in is too much. The investment opportunities are too obvious. But the players will need to get paid for it to matter. Thankfully, that's about to happen. And strangely enough, we have some owners to thank for accelerating that. Only If You Get Caught is written and hosted by me, Patrick Redford. It's produced by Alex Sujong Laughlin, with production support from Jay Toll Vieira. Editorial support from Tom Lay and Audrey Martovich. Justin Ellis is Defector's projects editor. Mixing by Samantha Gatzik. Show art by Jim Cook. Jasper Wang and Sean Kuhn are Defector's business guys. Thank you to the Defector staff. Defector Media is a collectively owned, subscriber-based media company. Only If You Get Caught is a proud member of Radiotopia.
Radiotopia.